This podcast is not meant to be professional advice of any kind. It is meant to be informative and entertaining. If you make any changes to your life, see the appropriate professional before you do so. Welcome to Super Age. My name's David Stewart. I am the founder of Ageist and your host on the Super Age Show. We talk about how to live healthier, how to live longer, and how to be happier. And who doesn't want that? Today's show is brought to you by Inside Tracker, the dashboard to your inner health. Go to insidetracker.com/ageist, save 20% on all their products. Today's show is also brought to you by Ned's Mellow Magnesium, designed to help busy people sleep better. Go to helloned.com/ageist and save 15%. Get yourself some better sleep. This week on the show, we have a fascinating conversation with Dr. Isaac Berzin. We're going to talk about omegas, omega-3s in particular, and why we need them for our brains and our bodies. And then his story about creating omegas from algae in Iceland in a plant that they designed that runs entirely on geothermal and basically uses nothing other than pulling the carbon dioxide out of the air. And I think he's giving us a sneak peek into what, one of the main components of the future of food is going to be, and how we think about where we get our food and how it's produced. And imagine eating food that's super nutritious and really is amazing for the environment because it's actually carbon negative. So pretty incredible. Amazing guy. You're really gonna love this conversation. This week, pretty much every morning, I've been getting up early and going to something called Sim Sports. I got an email from someone maybe a couple weeks ago, and they said, hey, you should check this thing out. So what Sim Sports is this being Park City, and sim being simulated, the sport being skiing. It's like a 180-degree big screen that looks very much like you're looking down a hill, and then you put actual ski boots on and you sort of click into this track. And the first time I saw this thing, I just thought like, oh my God, there's like no way I can do this. This is just like way too hard. But in the spirit of trying something new, I said, okay, let's give it a try. And the first day, I was pretty clumsy on the thing. I mean, I did okay, but I had to hold on a lot and stop a lot. But now I'm on like day 5 of being there, and I've gotten a lot better. The nice thing about this thing is that you get a lot better because you don't have chairlifts and you don't have to worry about, falling. So if you fall on this thing, what happens is you just sort of dump into this really soft net. So there's no problem with it. But there's still like, it was a new thing. And I think that one of the ways that we keep our brains and our bodies and our attitudes really flexible is to continually try new things. And, how often do you say in a week, I've never tried this new thing. Wow, like, what's this going to be like? Is this going to be fun? Is this going to be hard? Can I do it? So that's the spirit in which I've engaged this Sim Sports, and it's totally addicting. I'm like really into it. So I tried it and I liked it, and so I keep doing it. But I think for all of us, when somebody offers something and they're like, hey, let's go do this, whatever weird thing, you've never done it before, the watchword is yes. We just say yes, and you see what happens. And I could have gone to this thing and it could have been really dorky and I didn't like it, but whatever, like I'd experienced it. And if I say yes, I don't really know what the outcome's going to be. If I say no, the outcome is very predictable. Nothing happens. So that's one of the things that I've, I sort of prod myself to do every week. Anytime somebody invites me to do something or there's something new, it's like, hey, let's go check it out. So Sim Sports and their simulated ski racing machine. Like if you're ever curious about what that feels like, I recommend going to one of these facilities. It's really awesome. Today's show is brought to you by Ned's Mellow Magnesium. It's a sleep supplement that I've been taking for about 3 weeks, and it's great. I know a lot of you guys, we have problems sleeping. A lot of us, we wake up in the night or we have trouble getting to sleep, and you should check this out. So it's got Three different kinds of magnesium. Magnesium is awesome to help us sleep. It's also one of the minerals that 75% of Americans are not getting enough of. Mellow magnesium also has L-theanine and GABA, both of which are going to help us sleep. Personally, I take this about an hour before I'm ready to go to sleep. And my sleep efficiency for the last 3 weeks has been averaging, get this, 100%. So it's working for me. And so you guys might want to check this out. And full transparency, Ned shares all of its third-party lab reports right there on its site. So not just the research they do, but the research that everybody else does on their products. And that strikes me as a real vote of confidence. They have over 5,000 five-star reviews on their products. So I'm not the only one who likes this. You can't become the best version of yourself unless you're getting great sleep. Like nothing else works. You got to get sleep. So this is what you do. Go to HelloNed, that's HELLONED.com/ageist and get 15% off on all their products. Or if you forgot all that, just enter ageist, code ageist at checkout, and you get your 15% off there. Today's show is also brought to you by Inside Tracker. Inside Tracker is the dashboard to your inner health. You know, we talk about this a lot, about metrics, what matters, biomarkers. The thing is, you can't take actions on things that you don't know about. And what you don't know about can hurt you. I use Inside Tracker. I take their ultimate test 4 times a year. I look at their biomarkers. I see what's moving from quarter to quarter so I can see if I've made changes in my program and my diet. Is there something that I need to adjust? And their food first, supplement second recommendations are great. I always share the results with my doctor. And if there's something we need to go over, we do that. Get a dashboard to your inner health. Go to insidetracker.com/ageist. Save 20% on all their products. We're going to get with Dr. Isaac Berzin in just a second. We're going to dive into the world of omega-3s and what are polar lipids and why are they better, and why should we get our lipids from algae rather than, as he says, squeezing dead fish. Nice way to put it. We're going to get with him in just a second, but I wanted to remind everybody, after that conversation, we have that little thing at the end of the show called Just Try This. So stay tuned for that. Right now, let's give Dr. Isaac Berzin a call. Isaac, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, David, my pleasure. Pleasure being here.
Where are you, Isaac?
Actually, literally just yesterday moved from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. It's only 40 minutes a drive, but it's 2 different worlds. So I'm still enjoying the ocean view from my windows, and it's pretty cool.
What time of day is it for you?
It's 9 in the evening, still not too late, pretty charming, but it's a shift between after sunset where kind of the lights come on, and it's pretty nice. It's a nice view.
Lovely, the Mediterranean, beautiful place. So there's so much I want to speak to you about today. Let's sort of start with you're very interested in algae, and
Yes.
a lot of the way that it interacts with our food system, possibilities for future food system. But you're also involved in geothermal energy, and my understanding is there was sort of a transition here where there was a learning process about coming from the geothermal to then the algae, and how did that happen?
Several years ago, I got a phone call from a very nice gentleman. He said his name is Kitty. He's from Iceland, and they're looking for ways to monetize their clean energy and do something interesting with it. And they want to grow algae. And I said, "What? You have a darkness half of the year, and now you want to grow algae? It's kind of a stupid idea. So please don't call me." Okay, but he kept on calling me, and it was very sweet. And said, "Isaac, maybe you want to come over and see it for yourself." And I thought to myself, it's a small island in the middle of the ocean. What am I going to find there? But he was so lovely, and so I just came. And then it dawned on me that actually it's an amazing opportunity, because Iceland is one of the countries that has 100%, the only countries I think, they have 100% clean energy. It's either geothermal or hydro. So it's a unique place in which everything that you do there is going to be sustainable, at least from the carbon point of view. So I said, okay, I understand the opportunity, but there's a technology gap. No one knows how to grow algae on a large scale using LED lights, at that time. Okay. So it was a technological challenge. I gathered my two good old friends, the biologist and engineers, Sam and Steve, that worked with me for the last 15 years. And they thought it's actually not a stupid idea. Actually, they thought Kitty is right. And Iceland is the place to. And today, Kitty is the general manager of our production facility. So it's a pretty cool stuff. But I wish I was smarter, but I was just pulled into it, David. Actually, that's the honest truth.
So the facility then is powered by geothermal energy, and their LED lights helping the algae to grow 24/7. Is that right?
Correct. And then what happened during this, so the idea is very basic, but what we learned is actually pretty interesting. When you grow algae with sunlight, and we had built, I think, the largest open pond systems in the world previously. Even if you know what are the optimal conditions that the algae would be, you don't have the ability to actually enable those conditions, right? If it's a light or temperature, an open pond is an open pond. These are huge systems, and you cannot really manage them. It's like agriculture. And then what happens when you go from agriculture to biotech, you can keep the algae happy all the time. I'll explain what happy means and what it means technologically, but what it means to the algae. If you're the algae, what do you mean by happy algae? Okay. So if I can keep plus minus half a degree centigrade in your optimal temperature, so all your life you live in your optimal temperature, and you see the light quality in terms of the light colors that you want and the light intensity that you want. And if you move kind of closer to the light and away from the light, you're going to experience light and dark cycles that would keep you very happy. So all these conditions, the growth conditions, would make you happy all the time. Okay. And when you're happy all the time, you're not in a survival mode. You start producing all kind of interesting materials, like a lot of omega-3s, significantly higher quantities that you can find in open pond systems. So all these things made a huge difference in terms of what you get out of the algae in the end of the day. So cultivating a happy algae is a world of a difference for the algae, and then for whoever is using the algae. Okay, but I had no idea at the time, David. It's just something we learned by doing stuff.
I think if I was an algae, I would really want to be in one of your bio farming facilities.
It reminds me of, we lived many years in Boston, and my wife was very sensitive to darkness and cold temperature. So I felt sometimes like I'm married to two different women. There's my summer wife and my winter, and they're two different, like they have curly hair, both of them, but like there's nothing in common. So there is a world of a different temperature, and light make a difference on us and on the algae, definitely.
So let's get to the reason for all this. Why do we want, you mentioned omegas and growing this algae, and so the algae is there for us to consume. Why do we want to consume it? And what are the benefits to us?
Okay, so if you stop most of the people in the mall and you ask them, hey, tell me where omega-3s come from, they're going to tell you from the fish oil. That's where omega-3s come from. And they're only partially right. We squeeze the dead fish and use its oil, but the fish do not produce omega-3s. The fish only accumulate omega-3s that they by consuming algae up the food chain. But the producer of this molecule, this essential molecule that's called omega-3, is done by microalgae. Okay, so the issue is, okay, so there's sometimes the middleman creates value, but in the case of the fish, it's just practically easy to grab it and squeeze it. But actually, if you look at the composition of fish oil today, like it's all the pharmaceuticals, the chemical elements, the PCBs, like heavy metals, it's not a clean source. Okay, then you take it to the omega-3 companies, clean it up, and I'm not saying, but it's like, I can take sewage water and filter it and clean it, and there you go. Bon appetit, right? Getting to the source has this one dimension of being clean. But the second dimension has to do with the user experience, and I will explain. When you look at fish oil, if you mix fish oil in water, assuming your stomach is a kind of a glass half full of water, you're going to pour fish oil on top of it. It's going to float on the top, right? So that's where you get the fishy burst from. Something that's floating on the top, it's absorbed only through the sides where this layer touches the sides of the glass or the sides of your stomach. So it's a limited absorption rate. And but half of the people that stop consuming omega-3s, they do that because they cannot tolerate the fishy burps. Okay, and I can understand. Nevertheless, if you take this specific algae oil that is photosynthetically cultivated, the form of the omega-3 is a polar lipid. So it's a different chemical form. What it does, it creates an emulsion. So if you mix that oil, and it's very clear because it's a green oil, you mix it with water or you mix it in your stomach, it creates an emulsion. It spreads all over the place. It doesn't create a layer. And this emulsion stays. So the absorption is from all the sides of this glass, okay, but the glass represents your stomach. And then there's no fishy birds, and nothing floats on top. So the user experience is much better. And because you had such better absorption rate, you actually need to use less to get to the same effect on your body. So think about the end user. In the end, happy algae means that you can consume small amount of omega-3 rich algae oil that has no side effects, easy to swallow, and you still have friends because you don't have these fishy burps. So it's a pretty compelling argument, and it all stems from technology and from moving from agriculture to kind of biotech, keeping the algae happy, right?
And do you have any studies available for what's the ratio of, like, if I'm taking 1,000 milligrams of fish oil based versus polar lipid?
Right. It's a great question. So the way we see it is we see a 3x difference, which means you can consume a third of the omega-3s and still get the same benefit. And now let me explain what benefit means. You can measure omega-3s in the blood, which represent actually crossing the first barrier from your stomach to your blood. Okay? And there was a clinical study done. It's publicly available, peer-reviewed, and it basically compares two polar lipids. One polar lipid is the algae, and the second one is krill, which is also a polar lipid, but highly unsustainable way of getting your omega-3s. And algae oil showed superiority over krill oil, which is the most bioavailable. But the more interesting way to look at it is looking at something called omega-3 index. Why? Omega-3 index doesn't measure your blood levels. It measures the omega-3 composition on the cell wall of your red blood cells. So actually it represents absorption in your body. Okay, so it's a much better indication. That's not something that changes immediately. You know, you take omega-3, you measure blood level, it goes up, go down. That's it, right? It means something, but not a lot. If you measure omega-3 index and you have to look at it over a period of time, let's say 3 months, okay, then you can see the improvement in what's absorbed in your body. And there are very clear ranges of what's kind of a normal healthy range and what's under that. So it's very easy for individuals to measure their own performance. You don't have to go to the medical doctor for it or do anything crazy. It's a kit you can buy online. But the point of it is you measure your own progress because everybody is a little bit different. And everybody's metabolism is a bit different. And if I can take a randomized experiment, how are you related to that study? You're not sure. So the omega-3 index is meaningful. It's one number, and it's something you can measure your own progress. I think it's a beautiful way to see how you need very little to achieve a lot. You need very little omega-3, a third of the amount compared to fish oil to achieve your healthy omega-3 index. So it's a very powerful way to measure progress.
That's fascinating. I think it's sort of goes along with the vitamin D. Like, you need to test. Some people are absorb very well, they manufacture it very well in their skin, other people don't.
Yes, because sometimes it has to do with the enzymes that you have in your body that can digest fats or cannot digest fats, or it has to do with a lot of things. The human body reacts to your diet. It's not going to produce the same amount of enzymes if you have this kind of meal or other kind of meal. So in the end of the day, you get kind of a mirror of the true situation. And omega-3 index is a beautiful way to know. And I think you should know, right? And then you can fine tune it. You can say, I'm almost there, but I need a little bit more. So you boost your consumption a little bit. You can have a real-time feedback on what's really matters, which is not your blood levels necessarily, but your omega-3 index. I think it's a very nice way. It's a very meaningful way to learn what's your situation.
For everyone who's listening, we'll leave a link in the show notes to how to get an omega-3 test. One of the things I want to ask you, when we talk about omega-3s, we're talking about more than one thing. So there are components to it. Could you talk a little bit about what those components are and what the benefit to us is?
Correct. So when we talk about omega-3s that have significant impact on human nutrition, we actually talk about two. One is called DHA and one is called EPA. And historically, you could see that fish oil is a mix of both of them. So historically, a lot of the studies were done just on a mix, DHA and EPA, just not because it's the best, just because that's how it came through the middle fish, right? When we squeeze the oil out of the fish, that's what we got. But I think Japanese actually were the first one that made the effort to separate the EPA, one of those omega-3s, EPA and DHA, to separate the EPA out because they found the connection between EPA and cholesterol. And it was a prescription drug in Japan many years ago, pure EPA made from fish oil. So they made the effort of separating because they understood not all omega-3s are the same. Then there was a company at the time, it was called Martech. They were able to cultivate microalgae that was very rich in DHA only. And they were wondering, okay, DHA only, does it matter? Okay, so do the same, the following experiment, David. Go to any baby formula that you can find today on the market. Look in the ingredients. In all of them, you're going to find DHA. This DHA is coming from algae. And you know why? Because they made a connection between DHA and brain development in early stages. Okay. Once you made the scientific connection, then it became a standard ingredient in baby formulas. There was another study that was published. It was very interesting. It's a meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is looking at all the literature around the specific subject, and the subject was depression. So they were trying to make a connection between mood and omega-3 consumption. And you can see sometimes you can see an effect, sometimes no effect. So what's the secret for an effective way to improve your mood? And what they found out, it's something that they called unopposed EPA. So the EPA minus DHA. The bigger you have this number, EPA minus DHA, the better results you get on depression. And it's like magic. They organized the whole literature, the scientific literature, by unopposed EPA. You can see a linear relationship. Okay, so for instance, if you take 50-50, the effect is zero, right? But if you take a 60-40, so it's like a 10% difference, right? So that's how it works. So it's pretty amazing. So now we know, I think today we know that there are two different omega-3s and they have two different efficacies. And, I think most people don't distinguish between DHA and EPA really, but one step at a time.
Well, you've just given us a puzzling piece of information here. So if I understand correctly, the DHA is good for my brain and the EPA is good for my mood. But if I take them in equal measure...
I think generally you're right. Look, sometimes things work in harmony, right? If one of it is inflammatory and the other one, sometimes together. So I'm not saying only consume them separately. Sometimes you need both, to get the balanced effect. But just interesting to see how different omega-3s have different efficacy on different parts of your body. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Interesting. I've always sort of leaned into the DHA because I'm worried about my brain and I'm generally pretty happy anyway. So that's just me.
Okay, good. So you're a DHA kind of a guy.
I'm a
That's fine.
DHA guy. Yeah. So the we had some discussion here about how the algae, the way it's grown in these, you're growing it in a closed environment, and the algae is actually pulling out carbon dioxide. Is that correct?
Correct. So that's an interesting thing. When we think about carbon, we have two completely different thoughts. One thought is, oh my God, too much carbon in the atmosphere. David, we're gonna melt here. So much, climate change stuff. Okay, because this one is a gas. The carbon is in a CO2 gas. Okay. The second thing we think is, oh, we don't have enough carbon, not enough food, not enough feed, right? But there's a mechanism that moves carbon from being a gas to carbon being organic. This mechanism is called photosynthesis. And this is something any plant can do. Algae are just champions. And what I love about algae the most is the no waste. And I'll explain. When you grow corn, David, or wheat or soy, what percentage of the plant material, elaborate the roots, the stems, the leaves, okay, etc. What percent of the biomaterial are we actually consuming?
Very small.
Very small. Sometimes, David, it's a single digit.
Right.
We live like pigs. Actually, I'm insulting the pigs now. Okay. So when you think about algae, it's 100% nutrition. There's no waste because there's no leaves and stems and infrastructure. They're just single cells full of nutritional value that grow by cell division. And that's what I mostly love about them. So in the world of photosynthesis, algae are champions, very efficient, and therefore you can actually turn something that we call CO2. They think it's gourmet food. So every ton of algae just consumed 2 tons of CO2 by converting it from being a gas to building their own body. That's their food. They eat dissolved CO2. Okay, the trick is how you dissolve the gas in the water so it's available for them. That's where technology comes. That's where we learn what we learned. But if you kind of zoom out of it and you see what are you doing here actually, it's a beautiful thing. And I can say there's a value, there's a moral value of not, grabbing animals and squeezing them for their organs or for their oils or whatever. But in our case, it's a benefit for the end user. Okay, I'll give an example. National Geographic had several years ago, they just grabbed the fish off the shores of New York and they analyzed it for nutraceuticals. Okay, and here's the conclusion, David. If you have a headache, don't take Tylenol, have the fish because the Tylenol is already inside. Or if you don't want to get pregnant, you just eat the fish because and if you have a psychiatric episode, you just eat the fish. The fish is like a pharmacy, okay? And again, I think there's a huge benefit of getting something that's pure. It's not for my point. It's not for vegetarian necessarily. It just so much better on so many dimensions to get something from the source than it really. There's probably someone who enjoys the mercury flavor. I just haven't met him yet.
Seasoned with mercury.
Yeah.
So what comes to mind here is it's a very similar paradigm to, buying oil from, a Middle Eastern autocracy, and all the problems that come along with that, to something, more like solar energy where you don't have to deal with that, all that nastiness.
And actually, Iceland is a great example for this. A lot of the cars in Iceland are electrical cars, and it's people prefer it because it's just cheaper, but it's produced by using clean energy. So if you look at it, environmentally great, user experience great. It's really a win-win. So it's not always easy to find those win-win situations, but if you find one, I think it's a no-brainer. Let's just definitely go for it. Okay.
This image that you put in my mind of squeezing the dead fish That's going to be with me for a long time.
How do you think it's done? Okay, and I have to tell you,
Tell me.
don't think it's not an image, it's not a visual image, it's a smell. You know how it smells? And then you go, you know what? I recommend a visit at a omega-3 factory. They're going to show you all kind of columns. And they're going to tell here in this column, we take out the heavy metals. Here we take the PCBs. It's just a cleaning facility.
Mm.
It's a cleaning facility. I'm a chemical engineer. I can tell you, you can never clean something completely. There are always residuals. The best way is just not to start with something dirty. How about that? Okay, so you know the school of thought with omega-3 is the more concentrated it is, the better it is, because then if I concentrate the omega-3, by definition, I got rid of the other potential contaminants. Okay, here it's a different philosophy because everything in the algae is amazing. You have omega-7, which is palmitoleic acid, which is lovely. You have omega-3. You have tocopherols. You have antioxidants. It's a bag of nutrition. Omega-3 is just one component, but the rest are amazing as well. So it's just a different way to look at things. We're not trying to get rid. And I had several dialogues with omega-3 company. They wanted to distill the oil and purify it and concentrate it. Why? Why do you want to do it? You just stop for a second. What's wrong here that you want to take out? This is the composition. Tell me, what do you want to take out? They look and say, actually nothing. Want to keep it there. So of course you want to keep it there. So it's just a different way of looking at things.
Are you looking at different algae strains for perhaps different nutritional products?
Yes. So if you think about it, in nature, you have hundreds of thousands of identified strains. Okay. And I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Nevertheless, the number of strains allowed for human nutrition is maybe not handful, two handful. Okay. So I think it's a single digit number of algae strains allowed. The most famous ones are, chlorella, spirulina. Most people heard about them. And I think it's just reflecting a lack of maybe industry or sector that promotes algae, because you do have to go through regulatory process. I'm not saying you should not. Some algae are toxic, it's known, so you do have to get the job done. But nevertheless, it's like a box full of treasures that we only open a little crack in, and we just we're only starting to understand the potential. And if you look at a lot of the things that we are essential to life, they're coming from microbiological world, and they just we get them up the food chain. But I was talking to someone about beef, okay, and he told me that you can eat less beef, but B12 is very important. It's important for so many things, and beef is the most efficient vehicle to the cow is where we get most of our B12 from. And I said, yeah, but the cow doesn't produce it. So, what? The cow doesn't produce B12. It's a microorganisms in the four stomachs of the cow that produce B12. So a lot of time we used to get things up the food chain because that's how we were, that's how the world behaves. But listen, as a human society, we have moved from hunter-gatherers to farmers, right? We have done this move. And I think omega-3 is one of the residuals of that old mindset but the reason we started cultivating bananas because we ran out of bananas. Correct. So then and it's a huge knowledge. And I think if you look at aquaculture, for example, so most of the fish today on your plate are more than 60% are cultivated. Okay. 60 years ago, David, only 60 years ago, most of the fish on your plate were from the oceans. Okay. Were wild catch. What made the difference? You know what? We ran out of fish. We ran out of clean fish, ran out of fish in general. So we had to learn. And so I think we're in this kind of change but it doesn't have to take thousands of years. For aquaculture it was 60 years. I think in this it could be a single digit. And then people think, really? That's how we used to do stuff? Wow, that's crazy. Thank God we don't do this anymore. So I think it's just a matter of where technology or knowledge gets you. Just a different way of thinking about life.
Well, I'm just curious. I was just at the farmers market here I'm in Park City, Utah, and so there's a crop cycle, and there's a lot of snow this year, so the crop cycle was very compressed. What's the crop cycle on algae?
David, it's a great question. So let's look at it. The images. Think about a test tube that you just put a little bit of algae. There are macroscopic algae. So when you look at a test tube, it looks like light green. And then over a period of time, this test tube becomes dark green. And then it's time to harvest it and make it light green again. So, okay. So you have to wait. So from the time it's light green to the time it's dark green, you have to wait a whole week, David, a whole week. Okay. So you harvest weekly. Some people harvest daily that match the harvest rate to the growth rate. So you continuously kind of like milking the cow, continuously taking out and matching those two rates. So yeah, they grow on steroids. It's grown by cell division. So plants are growing from the apical meristem, from the edges. Every cell is an edge. So they just grow by cell. It's actually super efficient way of cultivating. But again, you need to provide light, you need to provide mixing, you need to provide nutrients. So you need to have a way to keep them happy. If you keep them happy, they're very happy. They grow and they produce and they're lovely.
So I'm thinking, what's the yield for like when you talk about the water, are you talking about surface area of the water or depth volume of the water? And then how much algae do you get out of the water? I'm sorry, I would be an engineer.
No, that's a great question. I love it. No, I love it. So I'll tell you my history. So I started with open pond. Open pond, imagine a huge surface area. It's like you can hardly see the other side of the pond. And there's a paddle with it, moves the water kind of around. And you bubble CO2 at a few places. And when you put your finger in the water, you can see that after maybe 2 centimeters, light doesn't penetrate. It's a dark green water. It's about 30 centimeters deep, but only 2 centimeters are photosynthetically active because they see light. So there's a layer of 2 centimeters actively growing, and then there's a layer of 28 just sitting there doing nothing. So by definition, an open pond is very inefficient. Nevertheless, what we do in Iceland, it's vertical farming. So imagine something looks like a big door. It's a 2.5 meter high, 2.5 meter wide, but only 5 centimeter deep. Okay, like a big box. Okay, a transparent box. And it's hugged by LED lights on both sides. Okay, so you have a huge surface area. And it's like you have many of those boxes, one next to the other. So in a very small footprint, you have an enormous light to algae area. Okay, therefore, that's why it's in a building. But this building, if I can unfold it, it's going to be a huge farm, maybe the biggest in the world. But it just folded into this origami of vertical farming of algae, and that's the trick. So on a surface area, on a per surface area, and I'm an engineer by training. So usually when you compare systems, you see 20% better, 30% better. That's an achievement. We are more than 100 times better than anything else on this planet, David, in terms of productivity per footprint area. And again, it's not a miracle. In the end, it's an energy balance between how much energy you put in and how much chemical energy you capture, right? So the energy balance still holds, but it's just done on a very small footprint with no water loss. And that's the other thing people have to understand. When you grow algae, you pay with water. And I'll explain. Even if you have a marine algae grown in a pond, what evaporates is H2O, it's the water. The salt stays in the pond. So if you want to compensate for evaporation, you only can do it by adding fresh water in, okay? So although it's a marine algae, you lose a lot of water because evaporation is evaporation. It's about 2 meters a year. So if you have a pond of 2 meter high, in the end of the year, it's going to be dry. 2 meters a year, it's a lot of water, okay? And then if you do fermentation by algae, you grow algae with sugar, which is another way of doing it. Photosynthesis is hiding in the sugar cane plantation, which also loses a lot of water. So whatever you're going to do, no matter how you turn it, you pay with fresh water, and fresh water is a limited resource in many places in the world. Nevertheless, if you do it in a closed system, there's no evaporation. Even the air that you put in and you recycle it is saturated with water, so there's no evaporation. So the only water loss is periodically washing it, and even that is filtered and reused. So in Iceland, we're operating above a freshwater aquifer, so we're not allowed to spill anything. It's a zero waste zone, which was a challenge in the beginning, but I'm very happy that's the case. We learned how to recycle the water, how to use them again, reuse them again. So all this knowledge was gained out of necessity. But I think if we think about it, David, that's key. So you have to think about water in agriculture. No matter what you do, water is something to think about, not only carbon footprint, but also that. And I will give you the last dimension maybe that I'm absolutely proud of, which is no pesticides, no herbicides. I think people underestimate the horrific price we pay because of the intensive usage of those two chemicals. They get into the water sources. Some of the plants are genetically modified to tolerate high amounts of pesticides and herbicides, but we're not. And there was a study in Brazil. They compared the area of the additional area of sugarcane cultivation versus the cancer cases in those areas. And you can see a linear relationship. In the end, people pay with their health. So it's not a joke. Okay, it's not a nice thing to do. I think it's a must. So we as society, I think we have to find innovative ways to get rid of those chemicals, to cultivate something in a sustainable way that's good for the environment, but also good for us. Okay, think about when you give it to your children. That's a very good example. If you can, then great. If you cannot, so just don't. It's someone else's children as well. So I think that's the way we need to think about those kind of things.
I'm curious about the other input, the carbon dioxide. Where does it come from? How do you get it?
Okay, so I'll tell you the secret, David. So what the geothermal power plant do, so Iceland sits between two tectonic plates that are drifting apart, okay? So the lava is pretty close to the surface there. What enables them to just dig a hole, which is 2 kilometers down, to just dig a hole. And there, when water hits this lava, they come up as steam. So it's like when you see how they dig those holes, it's like, and you see the steam coming out of there, it's like opening the gates of hell. It's like you won't believe the noise and the intensity of it. Wow, it's like a huge steam bursting out of the ground. They just capture the steam, and then they operate regular turbines. You know, we have to burn fuels to create steam to operate the same turbines. They just don't have to burn any fuel. Okay, and then with this steam, you have a lot of natural CO2. What the power plant was doing was separating the CO2 and then pushing it to the ground, but now they feed it to algae. So the CO2 is coming from a natural geothermal source as well. So that's the other trick. And I'll tell you the last trick about this integration with the geothermal power plant. And this is something that was not obvious to me, I have to say. We only learned it by doing stuff. So this power plant is selling electricity, but it's also selling hot water. So when you take a shower in Reykjavik, there's a high likelihood this hot water just came from this power plant. So there's a huge pipe of cold 6 centigrade water coming in, and the same pipe of 87 centigrade water coming out to the city of Reykjavik. There's even a private beach that you can swim in the ocean because they push this excess hot water into the ocean. So integrating with these two streams of hot water and cold water on their way in or out of the power plant. So we're not wasting water, but we're integrated into this for thermal management. That allows us to keep the algae happy. Remember, David, I told you we'll keep the algae happy by one of the things I told you, temperature, right? Half a degree, plus minus half a degree centigrade, which is very tight control. It's enabled by using those cold and hot water streams as needed. It's not obvious. Like otherwise, what do I have to do? Build a big chiller? Well, how am I going to keep the algae happy? You know, I don't know. When you put all this amount of light in, some of the light is turned into heat. It's like a big oven. How are you going to keep it? Okay. Also, LEDs need to be kept at a certain temperature. So you keep the LEDs happy in their temperature. You keep the algae happy in its temperature. So you can do it economically because you integrate with the geothermal power plant. And David, I wish I had this wisdom many years ago. As I told you, I was just persuaded by this persistent Icelandic guy. But he was right. He was right.
This is so impressive.
You have to come
really
see, David. Don't take my word for it. It's going to blow your mind. It looks like science fiction. Really, it's something I cannot express this in words. It's a bubbling thing that you go in, and the color is purple because you use red and blue lights, and it's bubbly and color. It's just like, you think it's like it's out of this world. It's an out of this world experience.
What are you working on next?
So next, we're trying to keep a different strains of algae happy, and this algae strain, we actually working on it to have the same nutritional composition as beef.
Wow.
Beef is one of
protein.
Yes, so it's not only protein. When I say protein, it's all of the essential amino acids. These are the building blocks of proteins that your body cannot produce, so you have to have them from an external source. Beef has them, and no single plant have all the essential amino acids. So this strain does. The second thing is bioavailable iron. Iron is an essential mineral, and in a digestible or absorbable form that's hard, that algae has it. And the last thing is B12. Remember I mentioned the cow, and now the cow doesn't produce it, it just accumulates it. Same thing. So we found the strain that has all these three components together. So if you can imagine a three-dimensional space where one is essential amino acids, one is iron, one is B12. So beef sits in a specific location, and all the other foods are millions light years away from beef. Beef is not like nothing else. Okay, any food that you can mention, not like beef. But that one algae strain, because of the cultivation conditions, is just like beef. So I think it's very powerful. You don't have to chew necessarily on algae. We're trying to integrate this into different foods, breads and yogurts and smoothies and all kinds. It's a nutritional celebration, actually. Working with very creative chefs because we want it to be an amazing experience and tasty and lovely. And we have a conservative approach, like, for example, like a bread that just looks like normal bread, but I can measure crazy amounts of B12 there. Or we can go to do a blue gin and tonic, right? So we have the whole spectrum of how crazy you want to be in terms of your food. So that's what's next. I think it's a alternative beef, and it gives you the freedom, David, to choose how much beef you want to consume, but you don't have to nutritionally do anything. You have total freedom to do whatever you want. Your health is not going to be compromised because of your choices, nutrition choices.
I think this is one of the big conundrums is, I'm a little older now and I exercise a lot, and I have to eat a lot of protein, and it's really challenging.
It's really challenging.
Yeah.
So I might surprise you, David. You might have something that's full of like a basket of nutrition, as I said. And the nice thing about it, you're not going to feel the different taste or smell. So here's the thing. I don't believe that for doing the right thing, you have to suffer. I don't. So if something is stinking or smelly or disgusting, I don't think that's a good way to go. So with this one, if you close your eyes, and I'm going to give you a yogurt with that, that is full of that algae, you will never be able to tell me by smell or by taste which one is which. We can do this experiment. I've done it a million times. When you open your eyes, you're going to see that the color of the yogurt is blue, and you're going to tell me, oh my God, there are no blue foods, right? Well, there are. But even the blue is antioxidant, so there's nothing wrong with that. So that's the next thing, David. Now you're curious. I see your face.
Well, now I'm thinking, okay, so a gram of this contains how much usable protein for a human?
Okay, so it has about 70% protein. Do you know any plant that has 70% proteins? Even meat, I don't think has
It's very
70% protein.
difficult. Yeah.
So it is a super food. But I think the bigger challenge, and people underestimate the microelements. Not only the proteins are obvious, and also the quality of the proteins and digestibility, etc. But beyond proteins, I think especially people that exercise and need the iron, and I think the young children, pregnant women, older people, they need B12 as well. It's very important for their health. So the right way to get it is from your nutrition. You need to build those reservoirs, and this is something that's again is being built over time. But no one has to suffer. It needs to be a nutritional celebration. So that's my point.
I think this is so fascinating. I just, the mechanical engineering nerd in me is just thinking about like your guys who came up with the vertical is just brilliant. And I'm wondering how many other places in the world could this have happened? I mean, there aren't too many.
Yeah. So, no, actually. So first of all, on your first comment, I wish I could tell you I'm that smart. I'm just persistent, David. Okay. I started with algae when I was a scientist at MIT many years ago. I didn't have white hair at the time. Now I have plenty of white hair. I hope some wisdom came, but I learned by elimination, David. I'm very persistent. I wish I could tell you I'm very smart. I'm not. Very persistent, though. Yes, I agree. The second thing is, if you think about the elements we mentioned, that you need clean energy source, right? But you need something that's continuous, not like solar or wind that intermittent. You need something. For instance, hydroelectric is an option, and there's a huge capacity of installed hydroelectric. But you don't have necessarily to be adjacent to the energy source. You can get it from the grid. So you can have a contract with someone with a large clean energy production facility and just connected through the grid, you buy from him. The second thing you need is cold water, right? You need to keep the algae happy, the light happy. But this cold water is just thermal water. You don't need it to be even fresh water. It could be ocean water. It could be many sources of water. It doesn't have to be. So you can think about many locations in the world that you can get clean energy, okay, and you can have cold water source. And then you just need a CO2 source, which apparently we have too much of that. So I don't think that's a huge problem. And then you can say, so this thing is scalable. And again, you don't need huge footprints because per area, this is orders of magnitude better than anything else in the world. So you're not talking about huge plantation. You're talking about a facility, a building that you can walk around and you can see this vertical farming. But the footprint is not that big.
And are you looking at other locations outside of Iceland?
So it depends on good partners. So there's a limit, every time you start a new project, you need just the local good people. I could tell you that my experience with Icelanders was amazing. I've never had such a motivated, smart, hardworking team. I think it really took me by surprise. And how much they enjoy working together. It's a group of all ages. We have different religions. We have different tendencies. Like there's almost nothing in common but the passion to what they do. So just watching them, how they relate to each other, how they relate to their work, is just something amazing. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a place with people that care. I'm a terrible boss, David. I cannot tell you when to come, when to go. If you're not motivated, if you don't care, I cannot make you care. I cannot be a policeman. Okay. So that's the key. In the end, it's not only the location, it's the people around it that need to care.
Absolutely. That's always what it comes down to, right? Who are you working with? Yeah.
Who you work with? Yeah, I agree.
I think this is you've just sort of blown my mind on this. I investigated this somewhat, and the whole operation.
David, the only request
amazing.
I have, don't believe a word I said. Come to Iceland. Iceland is lovely on its own. I think it should be on your bucket list. But I think seeing this facility, listen, you can measure your happiness level before and after, and you'll be able to see a big. It's going to move your needle. I can tell you, you're gonna see something that really makes so much sense and just feels right. And I think it's gonna make you happy.
I'm going
Absolutely.
to do that. I will do that.
Good.
I,
Yeah,
I've been
open
I,
invitation.
I've been in Iceland once. I loved it. I find it's an extraordinary place. I mean, there's like 150,000 people in the whole place, but it
Yeah.
produces things like Bjork and like there's just all this like amazing creativity that comes out of this little place. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
You know what they do? The funniest thing is, I think I think even you can find 3-year-old children, they can also always translate things per capita. So they got the most Nobel Prizes per capita. And they have the biggest, the best soccer team in the world per capita. And, so per capita they win. So, but I think that beyond per capita, it's a wonderful nation. And it just, I've been around, David, and this is you see how they treat each other, how they treat nature. They're special people.
Hmm. I agree. Very special people. Isaac, is there anything you want to leave people with today?
Yes, I think if you think about the human history, there are many moments in life which it was gloom, and we never knew how we're going to make it, right? But then, in many cases, science was the solution. It just took us to the next level of knowledge, and you can see it in many things, not only nutrition, right? In health issues, public health issues, in many cases. So I think we are in a gloom, in a not a happy place right now as human being. We look around us and it doesn't look so amazing. But I can tell you, learn based on what we have done before. I think there will be a way for a room for science to play a role and to move us to the next level of knowledge and choices and technologies to continue living on this planet. I really hope so.
I think so. I think it's a little gloomy now. There's a lot of the gloom is easy to see. It's everywhere, but
Yeah.
I think that as humans, we've been through this before and we seem to come through.
Yeah.
Isaac, thank you so much. This was just a pleasure, far exceeding my expectations. I had no idea about all of this. It's wonderful.
Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you in Iceland. There you
Absolutely.
go.
Let's do that.
Blue gin and tonic on me.
Okay. Take care,
Bye,
man.
David. Thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye. What a lovely man. And I got to say, I'm actually really excited about going to Iceland. I want to see this plant that he's built. It just sounds so amazing. And I was in Iceland once. It's an incredible place. It's just somewhere between like heaven and the surface of the moon. And if you've ever been there, you know exactly what I mean. But right now is that time in the show where we're going to do Just Try This. So we've been talking a lot recently about loneliness and about community. And something that's struck me recently is I've sort of been reviewing a bit of my past and thinking like, I think about these dozens and dozens of people who I was very friendly with. They were part of my community. Maybe I lived next to them. It intersected with work or some other thing. And then once that connection, whatever it was, the initial impetus for the friendship sort of went away, then the friendship went away. And I thought, that's really sad. Like, I miss these people. So, one of the things I would like to suggest for Just Try This week is just give somebody a call or send an email or a text to maybe somebody that you haven't been in touch with for a long time, and just reach out and say, hey, how you doing? I was thinking of that time when we did whatever, and that was great. I hope you're well. Send me some news. Let's get in touch. So just try this week. Reach out to somebody you haven't spoken to, haven't been in contact with for, 10, 15 years, and see what they're up to. It'll be good for them. It'll be good for you. Thank you for joining us on the show this week. We respect your time, we respect your attention, and we're very pleased that you have chosen to spend them with us. This is also the time in the program when you get to, guess what? Leave us up to a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. And maybe share this podcast with someone who you think could possibly use it. There's an idea. Next week, we've got another great show. Until then, please have a wonderful week and maybe reach out to a friend. We'll see you then. Bye now.